All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming by. Glad you're here today. We're going to have some fun. We're going to work on some flower arrangements here, and this is actually just a simple, small excerpt of one of my books I have in my studio. So I just basically cropped a small portion of the study lesson in the book. So you can basically do this with any type of reproduction of other artwork, watercolors, magazine pictures, online pictures, really anything, something you can bring up on your phone and then on your portable mobile device and freeze it on your phone and work from that. So basically, really, you can come up with a lot of ideas to just do like a small composition of maybe a larger picture, but just shrink it down like I did here, which I like to do a lot, shrink things down into like a small window. So I just use the mat here, and I also use a small piece of watercolor paper taped on the other side of this mat that I have here. So this is a regular standard mat for framing watercolors. And then I just take a piece of watercolor paper and I tape it on the back of the mat and shrink down the artwork as I need to kind of frame it out the way I think looks best. And so this is kind of a nice small composition we can do, and it's some really pretty flowers and lots of colors, and it's an interesting feel. There's like a window behind this flower arrangement here, so it's in a vase. The vase isn't, of course, shown here, but it's in the bottom portion of the painting. But this is a great composition to do. Sometimes just zooming in on a subject can really be fun to just work with, and so we'll do that. Again, this background here is a window, so there's bright sunlight coming through the window, so we have kind of like that effect of backlighting, really good backlighting, and then there's some regular ambient light inside the room, of course. So makes a nice composition. So let's work on that. I'll just set this across from me on my art table here. I sometimes work at my desk. So I work either at my art table in my studio or at my desk, sometimes the kitchen table. And we'll zoom out here. Okay, perfect. And the bottom of and this is tape, so I taped around my watercolor. So I have Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper, and I basically just taped around it with a good drafting tape, good artist tape. I usually use drafting tape. I find that's the best. Doesn't seem to cause any problems with tearing the paper when I'm lifting up the tape. So drafting tape is really good. And we'll start our drawing. So I'm basically just going to contour draw. Basically, I'm going to start in one spot and just move around. And with contour drawing, it's just real simple. It's starting in one location and then just using that one location. And then as I move through the drawing, I'm just using all of the previous portions of what I've drawn to kind of scale and gauge the other parts of the subject matter according to the what I've already drawn. So in essence, it's kind of a, let me see if I can find this. So here's some paper. So if we started with a flower like this, and then we have a stem going to the left side with contour drawing, we're going to look carefully as we're going this way and sort of see how far that stem reaches up before we have to start branching it out with another flower. So we would look at this stem and say, is that stem, this would be in our mind as we're carefully drawing slowly, very slowly. we would say to ourselves, how far is this stem projecting out from this flower? And if we kind of look across the flower, we can say, well, it's about the width of this flower. So in essence, we're going to use the flower here to gauge how far this stem is going up. So if I notice this stem, as I'm looking at it and I'm drawing, is approximately the same width as this flower, that's what I'm going to do. And if it's a little longer or a little shorter, that's okay. With contour drawing, it doesn't have to be exactly, like we don't have to take out a ruler and start measuring things. We just kind of get the general idea of the distances of things between each other. So that's kind of the idea of contour drawing. We're always kind of branching out from an area and gauging how our other parts of the drawing are relating to the place where we're starting from. And if we kind of stay within that area, and then we can keep moving out from there. So it's almost like a trip through the paper as we draw, and we're sort of staying close to other parts of the subject matter so that we can kind of gauge the sizes and distances of things as we go. So it's kind of just a slow process. We take our time. Of course, if you're not used to contour drawing, you have to go a little slower at first, but once you get used to it, you'll find that it's kind of like a rhythmic thing. It's almost like a beat of music. The beat will go quicker as you get more familiar with it. So I explain it to people sometimes that way. It's almost like it's got like a rhythm to it. So in the beginning, it's going to be maybe a very slow rhythm if you're just kind of getting new to contour drawing, or if you contour draw a lot, then your rhythm's going to be faster because you're sort of used to always looking at everything and gauging everything as you're going. So it becomes like a rhythmic type of drawing, where you're not making things exactly perfect, but you're getting it quite close to what you're looking at, what your subject matter is. So that's just a quick description of contour drawing. And then we'll start out here. We're going to look at our picture across the way. And we'll start down here. So I'm looking at this first flower, and it makes up about... And we can always do a preliminary drawing too when we're contour drawing. So we can almost just take a super incredibly light sketch of where things are. And then this is over here, the other flower. And there's another flower here. And I'm starting to get the rhythm now here a little bit more. But this is just a really super preliminary light sketch just to get the feel of where everything is. And then this over here is about at the same height as the top of this flower. So we'll just get a line there. And then this is sort of the other. So that's good. That's a very super light sketch. You probably can barely see it on the camera as I'm videoing here. You might be able to see that. And now we'll go in and do the drawing, the contour drawing. And I'm going to try to go slow. The painting process is going to handle most of the details and the real beauty of everything, but it's good to get the drawing in. And I'm going to work over this way. And I'm trying to keep the rhythm going here. Just trying to look at everything as I'm going. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I went out of the page a little bit here, off my boundary here a little bit, no problem. Again, when you contour draw, it's probably not going to always come out perfect. You'll find you'll have maybe more space in some locations, let's say next to your border that you drew. If you drew a border or you put tape down, you'll find that you might sometimes go off the page a little bit. That's okay. Or sometimes you'll find you might end up a little bit short of the border where your picture might be right on the border of the paper. So again, it's not an exact representation, but it's close. And I'll put the lines there. A little bit of the window panes. And that looks pretty good. So we've completed our contour drawing, and the fun part now is painting it. We'll definitely take a break. It's always good to take breaks. I didn't finish over here. I just saw that now. There's some more purple flower over here. So I'm going to just get that couple leaf or petal forms over here. The purple flower here. And that should be good. Okay, excellent. We'll take a break and we'll come back. All right, now we made it back where we took a break. I always encourage everyone to take breaks. It's really important to kind of just relax for a little while, maybe 5-10 minutes. If you stand while you're painting, you might be able to sit down for a few minutes, 5-10 minutes. Or if you're sitting down while you paint, you can stand up and stretch and just move around a little bit, refresh your concentration. So I think breaks are great. I always encourage everyone on my videos, if you're here all the time, you'll know I always say to take breaks. It's a great thing. It really helps tremendously to just keep your painting and your composition and whatever you're working on fresh and focused. And fatigue will be less likely to get you and cause maybe some problem with the drawing or the painting usually. So very good thing to keep in mind. But, some people I know have better concentration, so everyone's different. You might need more or less time to relax or more or less time to take a break. But for the most part, breaks are good generally, just for everyone, does help. And I just wanted to mention, too, if you're new here for some reason, if you're just stopping by, please consider subscribing. Also, if you hit the bell by the subscribe button, you'll be notified when our videos come out each week. We do every weekend we do new videos on everything watercolor, all types of subject matter. I also have over 250 other videos on my channel here that you can peruse through and look and see if there's other paintings you'd like to try or things you'd like to look at to learn new information on watercolor. And we'll keep going here. We'll get our paint. Our paint's ready to go, as you can see. It's got to be fresh, moist paint. I always, you'll notice if you're here all the time, I always say it has to be fresh squeezed 2 paint, or when you store your palette, if you put some paper towel, damp paper towel in your palette, and then put your palette into a plastic bag, and maybe put it in a cool place if it's warm out, or if it's winter time, you can put it by a cool, maybe a drafty window or something. Your paints will stay like this, really nice and moist, and you won't have to worry about anything. But if your paints are dry, it's really very hard to get good results with your watercolor painting, especially like you're going to see here. Right away when we get started with this, you're going to see how beautiful the color looks, and it's because we're using fresh, moist paint. So we're going to go right in. We're going to get some cadmium red. And again, I'm working from my reference photo, and I'll just... That's our reference photo. And I just sectioned it off a little bit with a piece of mat. And we'll set that across, and we'll get started. So straight in to the paint. And I'm just working around to get the shape of the petal. And rinse off my brush. I usually have a tissue on hand, and I usually take a little bit of water off the brush with the tissue. And then I go back in and I pick up that straight paint again. And I'll get a little more red, cadmium red paint. Maybe I might add a little cadmium orange, just a touch of that. Just to maybe change up that color a little bit. Maybe a little bit of purple. And dry off my brush. And then back in, I can also maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson there. I like to vary the colors. Makes for a really good effect. And here I notice the light is hitting the petal over here on the right side, so I'm going to put my paint on first, that thick moist paint first, and then I'm rinsing off my brush, tapping off some of the water, and then I'm just going to smooth out the paint a little bit into that area there, like that. And maybe we'll go in to get some interesting, this is rose madder. Now here I added a little extra water to get a lighter look here. Then I'll go back into the cadmium red. And I try to vary my brush the way it moves to get variations in the look of the shapes within the flower. And then here we're going to do some cobalt blue for the center of the petal, the center of the flower, mixed with a little bit of purple. And I don't make it a round, perfectly round shape. I kind of vary it a little. Then I'm going to connect up with the left side over here with the red. And again, I'm looking at the photograph across from me of the painting. And I'll mix a little green, sap green, olive green, a little bit of cerulean blue, a little bit of yellow ochre, cadmium lemon yellow, raw umber. I'm putting a lot of different variations in here just to get a little bit of an interesting green mixture that's not just a straight color from the tube. So I want to mix my green up a little bit, give it a little more interesting look there. So just a little bit of green in there, we see. A little bit of green over here too. And I'm starting to venture over to the right side here. There's some viridian green mixed with this green a little bit there, like that. That looks about close, maybe a little more blue. It's kind of a pale olive green with a little bit of burnt umber maybe. And some viridian. Okay, so that's looking very well so far, and let's work over here some more. We're going to get some purple. I rinsed my brush, and now I'm going in and getting some purple. Rinse my brush again, dry off a little bit of water, a little bit of splashing there. And then I added in a little bit of red, some alizarin crimson to that purple. More purple, and I rinse off the brush, dry the brush off a little bit, then I get a little bit of that lighter tonal value underneath. Okay, and I'm just working my way upwards from the base. I'll leave this for last, because I'm going to probably have my hand resting on the paper over here as I'm working up this way. So I'll leave I tend to work from right to left if I'm right-handed, or if you're right-handed, you'll probably more or less work right to left when you paint. And if you work, if you're left-handed, of course you would work starting at the right side of your painting usually, and then work to your left so that you're not leaning back into your paint. So I'm just being careful, and if you take breaks, a lot of times it'll dry for you. So breaks also work as an advantage when you're painting. Once you do something like this, you might take a break at this point when you get this first flower or two done, and then you can work, keep working after that. After a small break, we'll keep going here. And I just took a little bit of yellow, cadmium yellow, to put a little bit of color in here. Just a real light tonal value of some yellow. And I'll put that down here too a little bit, and over here. And then some more color over here. I'm just doing some of the windowsill and the windows, and some of the, this is probably by like a kitchen window or maybe in a living room or something, the flowers. Okay, now we're going to go back in. We'll get some more of that green mixture we have. That's olive green, a little bit of sap green, a little bit of raw umber. I dry off my brush a little bit. And then I just do a little leaf forms here. Then I might rinse off my brush, dry it off a little, then maybe get some of that cadmium lemon yellow. And just make a different variation of green here. That looks good. And get some more of that purple. We'll start working into this flower here. And a little bit of cobalt blue. And I'm going straight into the paint, no water really. I'll just rinse off my brush and dry off the brush a little bit. And then I go back right into the purple paint. So sometimes I don't always rinse off my brush if I'm using the same, pretty much the same color or colors. Like I'm going to go straight now into my cobalt blue. I really didn't need to rinse my brush, and then I rinse it now, dry it off a little, and then I can use the water in the brush now just to kind of get that light tonal value in this section here. Straight into the purple paint. So I try to get lots of variation here. And we let the brush dance around sometimes on the paper to get those little spots of white paper occasionally, just to keep things, some of that light bouncing around in the picture. And we're changing our colors here. We're going really with the purple and cobalt blue. Just sort of mixing those two. And we can always go back in and do a little more work into the flowers to get more shapes of each individual petal by adding a little darker paint or tonal value. So that's always the thing to keep in mind. When we're painting a flower, we can always go back in and add a little more definition to it, just to have it look a little more close to the what we're painting from. And we'll do this here. And we'll go in and get some of that darker. Paint there, maybe a little bit of burnt umber, cobalt blue. Then some cadmium lemon yellow to get a lighter feel. And again, if we can swing our brush around, I usually just take my hand and my arm and kind of swing it around to get the point of the brush this way, to get that point there of the petal. And then maybe some of the raw umber. Almost pretty much straight paint there. Raw umber, straight paint. I rinse the brush, dry off the brush a little. And then straight into the raw umber and then get a nice point on there. And then just... And that's pretty good. And now's probably a good time for a break. So let's take another break. I know the tendency is to want to keep going, but I think a break will be good here. So let's take a quick break and we'll come right back. All right, so we had a little break. Going to clean up the palette a little bit here. Just make sure we want to keep fresh, clean colors as we work. So every once in a while, we're going to clean up our palette when the colors start to look a little muddy. These colors over here are still in good shape. They look fine. We don't have to really worry too much there. And let's continue. I change my water occasionally too as well, my water bucket. And we'll continue on. We'll start working here on this flower. We got purple straight into the paint. That's that fresh, moist paint. And cobalt blue mixed in with that as well. Okay, so we got a good feel for different color there, different color mixtures. Maybe a little cerulean too. Maybe alizarin crimson and rose madder. Rinse off my brush, dry a little bit. And that's the rose madder and alizarin crimson. Then I rinse the brush off and we'll go back into the purple and we get some color in there. I'm going to use the damp brush. And we're getting our shapes. We're following the shapes of our petals of our flower. And a couple splashes. And then we'll get some green, olive green. Cadmium lemon yellow. A little bit of raw umber. and maybe a little bit of Viridian. Maybe a little bit of sap green with some sap green and cobalt blue for a little darker. Just to give it a little bit of a change there. And maybe some raw umber. We can get that stem in there. Just and I'll change the color of the stem a little bit. Maybe a little bit of burnt sienna. So I get those straight, fresh, moist burnt sienna, dry a little bit off on the tissue, and then I'll also add that in as an interesting color. And I'll add it there too. So I'm going to, just as a reminder for myself, what I usually do is if I add a new color in, which I just did, some burnt sienna, I definitely, as soon as I do it over here, I automatically just find another place on the painting to sort of work a little bit of it into the other portion of the painting, because if I just do it in one location, it doesn't look as good. It always looks good to have a little bit of counterbalance with the colors. So that's why I do that. So that's just a good reminder for me. That's my technique or my habit of doing whenever I add a new color I haven't used it at all in the painting, then I'll make sure I just right away, so I don't forget, I immediately go in a few other locations and just add that in a little bit, and it works good. And we're going to go into some more sap green, cobalt blue, burnt umber. We're going to make a darker green with a little bit of Viridian. And we'll do and here I'm trying to just get the feel for the leaves, like that nice feel of then I dry off my brush a little. And just go back into the green, the darker green like that. That looks pretty good. And then I might start working on the feel of the window pane a little bit there. And I go across. And I'm following the painting as close as I can. And a couple more splashes. All right, so we're really getting there. We're almost finished. We're going to take our last bit of purple, and we're going to start painting in our flower shapes over here, our petals. So I go in and then I go into the water supply and add lots of water. A little bit of cobalt blue. Straight paint right from the paint supply with really hardly any water on the brush here to get that dark. And then there's a few darks here. I'll add that in more. And a couple spots of color. And while we were on a break, I did a little bit of cerulean blue here with some red, cadmium red, just for the trim work here by the window. This is a window here. So the vase of flowers is right by the window, and there's the window panes, and so we're sort of working with that idea. And if you see there's an area you want to get a little bit lighter tonal value in a flower, you can always go in with a little bit of tissue, and we can roll it up, and then just dab a little bit of paint to lighten up a spot. And then we can also go in and do a few details to the flower if we want to get a few more the feel of the petals. We can add a little more another wash, a light wash, just a little darker in tonal value to pick up some of the shapes of the petals. I think when doing the petals, it's good to kind of just have a free, kind of flowing curved lines, curved lines for the petals. So I'm trying to do that here. Just have a little bit of the flowing feel to things here. Everything else looks pretty good. And there's a little bit more color over here. And that's just basically the burnt sienna and a little bit of the green mixture for the woodwork. And the bright light of this, the bright sunlight coming through the window, kind of plays around in the scene, in this painting, so you kind of see some of the wood trim and you don't see other parts of it. That's kind of the light bouncing around, so it's kind of that feel of bright light, and it's backlit, so some of the flower shapes even become a little bit diminished. And then sometimes adding a couple small shapes of color with this flower kind of makes it feel that there's bright light along the outside rims of the petals. So that's a thing we can do. And I think this is good. Maybe we'll take the tape off and see how it looks with the natural border of the tape. I hope we had fun with this. This is really a fun exercise and a composition to do. Again, we took lots of breaks. You can do this over a couple days or so. Like if you're crunched on time, you can do 15 minutes every day. And in 2 or 3 days, you can kind of get through this. And as long as you're just using the same palette with the same fresh colors in here, you just continue working and you'll have all your colors still here to reference back to. So you'll always know in the beginning if you're just kind of starting out with watercolor or you're just a couple years of painting, sometimes it might be a little challenging to figure out what colors you were using in your painting. But as time goes on and you keep using the same palette and the same colors, you'll pick up real easily on what colors you were using, so you wouldn't even necessarily need to leave some paint out on your palette. But if you're sort of new and you're not so sure about colors, if you can match back what you were doing here, you just leave some of your paints out on your palette like this, and then you'll be able to more easily see the colors you were using. You can jot it down on a piece of paper, the colors if you want, or you can reactivate these. These reactivate pretty nice. A little bit of water and we can use those. And we'll take a look. Let's see if we can zoom in here a little bit. Okay. All right, so we had a lot of fun. Let's enjoy our watercolors. It's a process. It takes time, whether you've been painting just a couple weeks or a couple months or years. If this is maybe some kind of new subject matter you're working with where you haven't really tried flowers before, then it takes time to get used to it. It takes time to get the feel for it, so never worry. It's just a matter of working on it a little bit every day or so, or once a week, even if we paint. That's a really good way to practice. All right, everyone, we'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.